All right, guys, so the lessons that we've had so far have been over Reconstruction. We've talked about the 10% plan, presidential Reconstruction, radical Reconstruction. Well, today we're going to get to the end of Reconstruction. So your essential question for today's lesson is, who was responsible for the end of Reconstruction, the North or the South? So this is going to be an opinion. So you got to give me evidence to support your opinion. Now, I'm going to be honest with you, you can get plenty of evidence for both sides, but you've got to pick one, all right? You've got to pick one side, and this is also going to be the question that you guys have for the DBQ that you're going to start next week. So this kind of gives you a little bit of a heads up on it, a head start. 14th Amendment prevented any former Confederate from holding office. Remember, 14th Amendment had two parts. Part number one said that blacks were now citizens. The other part was a punishment for Southerners. No former Confederate was going to be allowed to hold office, which basically meant that no qualified Democrat was allowed to be in any part of government in the South. There were, however, two groups of Republicans that are able to govern, and technically there's really three, and we'll talk about them. First group is the carpetbaggers. The carpetbaggers are Republicans who came from the North to the South. So if you look at this political cartoon right here, you've got this guy. He is on top. This is a woman. In political cartoons, women always represent things that are good, things that need protected, things that are precious. Well, this woman, on her cloth right here, it says the South, or the solid South. She represents the South. On top of her is a carpet bag with a man riding it. There's all sorts of weaponry. The South, the lady, is chained to the soldiers. All right, so it's saying that the South is now a prisoner of the United States military and the carpetbaggers. If you look in the background, you see burned house in the background. It's a reference Sherman's March. So these carpetbaggers are seen as invaders. All right, they are white, but they are seen as invaders to the South. They are hated by white Southerners. They are Northern Republicans. The other group isn't really liked any more than the carpetbaggers. They are the scalawags. The word scalawag means traitor or liar. They are seen as traitors to the South. All right, don't be surprised if this is one of the vocabulary words that you guys have on your vocab quiz. Maybe I can get it. There we go. All right, so scalawag. They are men that were born in the South, but they have now joined the Republican Party because they see that's where the power is. About 25% of the Southern whites have switched over to the Republican Party now, so they are seen as traitors. The other group, the third group, is African Americans, and they begin to hold office in large numbers. More than 600 African Americans were elected to Southern governments. 16 of them were elected to Congress. The first senator was Hiram Revels. First African-American senator was Hiram Revels. Radical Republicans, radical Reconstruction. The one lasting effect of radical Reconstruction is schools. They also built hospitals, prisons, and orphanages. All of these are things that rich white people didn't need. Rich white people didn't need schools. They had tutors. Rich white people didn't need hospitals. They paid for the doctor to come to their house. They don't need prisons because they can hire good lawyers, get themselves out of crimes. And they don't need orphanages because since they're rich, their children are going to be well taken care of. Remember, the Freedmen's Bureau, this is all stuff they're helping with. The Freedmen's Bureau didn't just help black people. They're helping everybody affected by the Civil War, so this helps them as well. The South, majority of it was poor. This helps them. Laws were also put in place to end discrimination because of color. These laws often have to be enforced by the military. That's why martial law is here. That's why we have radical Reconstruction, to guarantee that the freedmen actually receive these rights. The main group that opposes these, this is the Ku Klux Klan. The Klan uses terroristic methods to scare Republicans in the South. That includes just scare tactics. It includes violence. It includes killing. The The Klan was formed in Pulaski, Tennessee. Tennessee has a history of being one of the most racist states because Tennessee did not have to go through Reconstruction. It was already captured before the end of the Civil War, so it was already back in the Union. Tennessee never went through Reconstruction, which is why some of the most racist stuff our country went through actually started there and then migrated to the rest of the South. With radical Republicans in charge, they passed a law quickly to outlaw the Klan called the Force Acts, but we're going to call them the Klan Act. That's what the nickname for them was, and it's what everybody used. This temporarily ends the threat of the Klan in the 1870s. The Klan will come back because technically the Klan,
Good afternoon, everybody.
even though it should be illegal,
have finished their grades and talking to people. But just a reminder, you do need to actually go into your grade book and hit that verification button in order for your grade.
All right, we're back because we don't want any interruptions with the announcements. But the Klan technically is illegal, even though it's a horrible thing. The freedom of speech from the First Amendment actually protects it. As long as they are not doing illegal activities, the Klan, technically, as horrible as it is allowed to exist, is allowed to protest and share their point of view. As long as they're not doing anything illegal, there's nothing that can be done to stop them. By 1876, many were becoming unhappy with Reconstruction, both in the North and in the South. This was caused by a number of different things. You have the Panic of 1873. It is an economic depression. The General Amnesty Act of 1872 actually repeals the part of the 14th Amendment that said that whites or that former Confederates couldn't serve in office. So now we've got all those former Confederates returning to office. And the election of 1876 shows clearly how unhappy that people were with the United States government. The thing that causes change in government more than anything else is when people are unhappy. It doesn't mean that they're going to change it for the better, but they are going to demand change. In this election, the presidential election of 1876, you have the Republican Rutherford B. Hayes run against a Democrat named Samuel Tilden. The votes in the Electoral College pointed to Tilden, the Democrat, as the winner. The Republicans protest the results in 3 southern states and in Oregon. In order for the Republicans to win, the protests actually have to go in favor of the Republicans in every single instance. The Republicans needed exactly this number of votes to win the Electoral College. Well, the Republicans are in charge of investigating it. The Republicans are in charge of coming up with the decision. And the Republicans find in favor of themselves in every single instance. And because of that, all of the votes are awarded to Rutherford B. Hayes. Now, in 1860, the South was furious about the election of Lincoln. Lincoln won fair and square, but the South seceded because our votes didn't matter. In 1876, the South actually wins. The Democrats win. How are they going to react if an election is stolen from them? Well, to prevent the problems, you know how everybody was talking about like Trump and fraud and stuff like that? Nothing compared to this election. To prevent problems, the Compromise of 1877 was made. This political cartoon right here shows what happens with the Compromise of 1877. What these guys are doing right here is they are trading. This guy has a gun, he has a whip. He is handing it over in return for the protests, Tilden or blood. Just handing this way. So the South is giving up on Tilden, while the North is handing guns and a whip to the South. Basically, here's what happens. The Compromise of 1877 is a deal made between the North and the South, where the North, now compromises, everybody gets something, the North gets Rutherford B. Hayes to be the president. The South gets the removal of martial law. With martial law being removed, there is nobody left to protect the rights of black people. There is nobody to enforce the civil rights that have been given to black people. And in the political cartoon, you see that the whip has been given over as well, which is a symbol that, without actually giving slavery back, slavery, a life very close to it, is going to be returning to the South for African Americans. With radical Reconstruction over, the Old South very quickly returns to power with a group called the Redeemers. The Redeemers are the Democrats that actually were in charge before the Civil War. They are the old Democrats. They are returning to power. They are taking things back over. The Redeemers very quickly reverse Reconstruction. They reduce the spending of government on public projects, on things like education and hospitals and prisons. They take all the money away. They take the rights away from African Americans. Now, just so you know, they don't completely get rid of schools, but they severely cut spending. To take the rights away from African Americans, the way that you do it is you simply take away their right to vote. And the way they can do that is the way the 15th Amendment is worded. The 15th Amendment says you cannot be denied the right to vote because of your race, your color, or your previous condition of servitude. But you can be judged on so many other things, like your education, like your income. And so very quickly, the South starts to work its way around the 15th Amendment to take the right to vote away from black people. First method of taking rights to vote away was the poll tax. If you can't afford it, which most blacks couldn't, you can't vote. Second method was a literacy test. Literacy is the ability to read. And the way they would do that is a lot of times they would use parts of the United States Constitution. They would take, which is written by lawyers. It is on a very high college reading level. Well, if you couldn't read it and explain it, then you don't get to vote. Now here's the problem. Most white people are poor. They can't pay the poll tax. Most white people are uneducated. They can't pass the literacy test. So a way to give white people back the right to vote was created. It was called the Grandfather Clause. Grandfather Clause said that if your grandfather could have voted, this should say before 1860, then you can vote. Well, no black people's grandfathers would have been able to vote in 1860, so they don't get the right to vote back. But all the white people, their grandfathers could have voted in 1860, so they get the right to vote back. It's important you guys realize this. The Grandfather Clause doesn't take away anybody's right to vote. All it does is give it back to the white people. Segregation also became legal with the passing of something called the Jim Crow laws. The Jim Crow laws enforced segregation. Jim Crow laws made segregation required. Segregation is dividing things up by characteristics. And at this point in time, we are dividing them on color. The African American locations for everything were much less sanitary, much less comfortable, much less safe than where the white people were sent. Here's an example of segregation, or actually this is more discrimination than segregation. Only white people were allowed to buy the Coke from the machine. This gets challenged in the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court rules that only the government could not discriminate. That private businesses are able to do anything they basically wanted to. In 1896, Jim Crow laws were put in control of the South with a Supreme Court case called Plessy versus Ferguson. In this case, you have an African American in air quotes, all right, so we'll explain that in a second. His name is Homer Plessy. He bought a first-class railroad ticket, got on board the train. However, in the state he was in, blacks were not allowed to ride in first class. Homer Plessy was arrested for refusing to move. Got this political cartoon right here. Pretty obvious Homer Plessy's black. Problem with political cartoons, they're drawn. Guys, this is Homer Plessy. Homer Plessy was 1/8 black. He's not going to look black. He actually told the people on board the train that he was black. He wanted to get arrested so that he would have a reason to challenge this in court. The best analogy I have ever heard about all of this, because you guys would say he's white, is this. If I take one chocolate chip and put it in a cookie, that automatically makes it a chocolate chip cookie. That's how they looked at black people. If you have one drop of African American blood in you, according to the laws at the time, that made you African American. The court case of Plessy versus Ferguson comes out with a ruling. The ruling is separate but equal. Separate but equal is the ruling, which meant as long as the same service was provided for both white and black people, segregation was 100% legal. All right, your essential question, remember, who was responsible for the end of Reconstruction? Is it the North? Is it the South? Think of the compromise. Think of the laws that have been getting passed. Think of the Redeemers. Think of the election. Think of all of that and come up with your verdict. Was it the North's fault or was it the South's fault? All right, make sure you get all these questions answered. Email me if you have any questions. I'll see you with another lesson.